Are you looking for a new job or interested in leveling up? Job Search Radio is your go-to resource for insider tips on job hunting and growing your career. Here's your host, Jeff Altman.
Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you're listening to Job Search Radio. You know, I've been a recruiter for a long time, and I remember when I first started in the field and I would look at resumes, after a while I started to ask myself, what happens to people when they turn 40? They all seem to disappear. And now I'm certainly not 40 anymore, and I take a look around and I see the common age of resumes is 50, 60, sometimes older than that. And it begs the question of what's changed. Does job search for someone who is older any different than it really is for someone younger? And I thought I would bring in an expert to talk with about this. So my guest is Eileen Williams, who's the author of a great book about job hunting called, Land the Job You Love. She's also a blogger and podcaster for The Feisty Side of 50. That's what each one of those is called. And she is also a job search author for HuffPo 50. And I think she'll provide you with great information. So, Eileen, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on board.
Well, Jeff, I have to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's my favorite topic to talk about, and I hope we can get some good information out there for people who are on the feisty side of 50.
I'm sure we can, because I know we're both kind of feisty, you know?
Right.
So, Eileen, what's changed? Why did it suddenly become later than 40? Why are people working later, in your opinion?
Well, for one thing, I think it all has to do with our very interesting generation, the baby boomers. And if you are close to my age, and we probably both can remember the old adage we used to bandy about that, don't trust anyone over 30. So we were really bad when we were young. But
I'm so glad no one can see my face when I heard you say that line. It was painful.
And I think, though, that we really, throughout our lifetimes, we have revolutionized all sorts of aspects of society. We're not giving up now. We're not going away anytime soon. And our careers, we want to contribute. We want to grow our own selves as people. And there is a whole shift, a whole different paradigm, so to speak, for job seekers over 40 and over 50.
I agree. And what I find is, number one, many previous generations really didn't like work. And I think ours really does. We enjoy contributing. We enjoy, helping an organization be successful. In my case, helping people find work. And I know for a lot of people, of course, there's a different reason, which is financial need. Unlike previous years when there were pension plans that might assist people with retirement, those have long since disappeared, and thus the need to work later exists for folks. Does that fit in from your thinking as well?
Oh, absolutely. That's one thing. We boomers may have revolutionized aspects of societies, but we weren't particularly good savers in a lot of cases. And, yeah, that income is definitely important to people. But the other thing, too, is we have so many more options open to us for aging. I remember my dad hated his job, but he did it for 30 years, and I think that's the case a lot of times with earlier generations. But we've got options. We have careers that we can choose that are not only remunerative, I mean, in other words, we get money for them, but we also can, provide ourselves with this internal satisfaction. We can live out our values, and again, that contribution, that helping others, those kinds of things.
Cool. So let's go to the next part of this, which involves what sort of problems do those over 50 have? Because I know when I talk to younger job hunters, they perceive certain problems with age bias. The boomers don't really respect them. I know older workers tend to think that when they're interviewed by younger workers, ageism plays in effect, like, you can't work for anyone younger than you, can you? is the implied question that is never directly addressed. Am I just blowing smoke here, or are some of these honest from the experience of the older worker?
Oh, I think that you hit on something that's very real. Ageism, I believe, is out there, but I don't think it's as all-pervasive as we've been led to believe. However, if you are, say, an applicant 50-plus, and you are sitting across the desk from an interviewer who's in their 30s, you can bet that they are holding some of these stereotypes. And I think it behooves us to be proactive in some cases because, they're likely not going to say anything, but they may eliminate you from the position just because of your age. So I have some thoughts on that as well.
So in terms of eliminating you because of your age, why do firms still hold that bias, in your opinion? And what can someone do to rectify it?
Well, again, being a little bit proactive in the job interview, if you get a sense at all that that person who's interviewing you might be holding those thoughts, I figure you have nothing to lose, so you might as well bring them up. And a couple of things that I think are really critical. First off is the technical issue. I think that's the number one stereotype that younger employers might hold against us. And there's
I'm going to leap in and say, the technical issue?
Yes.
What's the technical issue?
Well, many of us, there is the fact that, they believe we have not kept up technologically, that our skills, that we don't have the chops for the job, so to speak. And I think we have to proactively state that in a couple of ways. Excuse me. First off, on your resume, I suggest that applicants of maturity, I like to call us, or seasoned applicants, put a special section underneath the formal education part of our resume. And I would call that ongoing professional development. And then any kind of technical training you've had, and there are low-fee and free websites on the web we can discuss if you'd like, but anything like that, you don't need to have a huge list, but I would list certain things. So ongoing professional development, when a reviewer reads that, they can take from that you do care to keep your skills current. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think I'd proactively bring up something, in whatever words suit you best, to say something like, I pride myself on keeping current with my technical skills. Coworkers turn to me to help them in certain aspects technically, things like that, so that the interviewer can get that sense that, that is not a problem for you. Especially
is that something you do in the resume, the cover letter, on the interview? How do you get that, I pride myself in keeping myself technologically current?
Well, on the resume, as I said, I think that ongoing professional development section is really something that can give a resume of a mature job seeker a boost, because that will differentiate you from the competition who might not have something like that. And then I would certainly bring it up in the interview. I don't know on a cover letter, it couldn't hurt, but depending on what you're going for. But as I said, especially if you get that sense that they might be negating your skills merely because of your age, that would be something you'd want to consider, again, addressing proactively rather than not mentioning anything.
So what are some of the tip-offs that an employer or an interviewer might give that they're, I'm going to just be blunt about it, minimizing the older worker and not taking them seriously?
Well,
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. In the interview in particular.
Right. In the interview, some of the tips, I think you can tell if that rapport isn't, you're not building the rapport that you'd like, if they're not asking you questions of real substance, if you are presenting your skills in a way and underscoring your skills with examples and things like that, and they don't seem to be making an impact. I think it's probably more of a gut feeling you could get, or if they are not asking you the kinds of questions that you want, sometimes you have to be a little bit more proactive in bringing up those talking points that you wish to speak about as well.
And I want to come back to this topic in just a moment, but first I want to give everyone my Job Search Insider tip for this show, which is to talk about how to really create a keyword-laden resume, so that this way firms, when they're looking at your resume or they're searching for your resume on a job board, on LinkedIn, or just in their applicant tracking system, are going to identify you as someone who they'll want to talk with. And the easiest way to do it is look at job descriptions for what you do. take a look at 10, maybe 15 job descriptions that fit what the kind of work that you do. And instead of just simply going, I can do that job, start looking for the common patterns that exist within jobs and start using the same language that these job descriptions have. If you're in IT and they're talking about a particular application, again, use that particular phrasing that's used. And you'll start to notice patterns of comment that will that you can bring into the resume, that you can incorporate into the cover letter, that will allow you to stand out much more than the average job hunter who's just doing things hit or miss. Now, I just want to mention to everyone that I have a lot of great content at my website, so if you found this tip helpful, I want to encourage you, come over to thebiggamehunter.us and go exploring there, because I have video, articles, podcasts that you can listen to from my website that will help you find work more quickly. Plus, you can find out about the coaching and the call-in programs I have that will help you. So let's come back to Mary Eileen and pick up where we left off. And that was talking about how to sense when you're losing the interviewer in the course of the conversation. But now I want to flip things, and that is, and talk about what someone may unintentionally do that turns off the interviewer, and talk about their part in creating that situation. So are there any things in particular you've noticed that people unintentionally do that turn off someone who's interviewing them?
Well, of course, there are certain cues that you'd be giving off nonverbal messages that are really important in addition to the words you're saying. But, again, you want to keep your body language open. You want to show enthusiasm and interest through your vocal tone. You want to nod appropriately, give good eye contact. Eye contact actually is the number one issue that a lot of interviewers will say that if the eye contact isn't there, they're not interested in further information from that person. There are all sorts of nonverbal cues that you can give off, but I want to underscore what you just said, your tip, because it was wonderful as far as searching out the job postings and making sure that your resume is filled with these hot button skill words or these keywords. And I think the same is true for the interview. You want to make sure that you are go and get that position description if at all possible, and that you are speaking to the skills that they are interested in, because if you're not, you're going to turn them off as well.
Exactly right. It's like talking two languages. You're talking one language, they're talking another, and you're not really communicating effectively. So it's always good to speak the same language, both in the resume and on the interview. So I think one of the things that starts to happen to, I think, any job hunter, but I think it's particularly damaging to the what I call veteran employee, is as they run into a longer job search than they wanted, they start to feel defeated and down. And thus, when they start to interview and they are greeted by the 28 to 34-year-old hiring manager, their heart sinks. They start to feel as though they're going to be rejected right away. Now, I know you're a person who believes in positive thinking and keeping a good attitude. And I think it's important for the job hunter to do that as well. So what are some of the advantages that a seasoned job applicant has that might help them restore their faith in themselves and deliver the goods on the interview?
Well, I think first off, again, you bring up a really good point, Jeff, because I think especially as a job seeker, a veteran job seeker, I like your terminology, we need to come from a position of strength. You do not ever want to apologize for our age, and we can add value in a lot of areas. One of them is we've got a skill set we've gained over a lifetime. We also have market knowledge. Even if you are transitioning to a new career, you generally know who the competitors are, where the customers, what's important to the customers, these various aspects of the job market itself or the company's target market, you might know that a younger applicant might not. The other thing I think that we have to stress are the skills that are really important, that are a benefit of age. One of them being critical thinking skills. We've been there and done that a lot. We have an understanding of how things go and how things run that, again, the years have gifted us with. So we want to stress our critical thinking skills, our communication skills, because we grew up at a time when you actually wrote letters and spelled out words and things like that, and spoke with people face-to-face many times. We oftentimes have superior communication skills to a younger applicant, and also the ability to handle difficult situations. We're not thrown as easily because, again, we've been there and done that a lot. I could go on and on this point, but I really think that we do want to come from a position of strength for sure.
I agree, and I also want to remind everyone you can't do it from the standpoint of, and I'm going to do a caricature here that we've all seen in one movie or TV show or another. Hey, Sonny, when you were busy learning how to tie your shoes, I was doing your job. So, all that happens is you turn off the audience. So, what I know you were talking about is the good reminder for the job hunter, but it can't ooze out in arrogant ways. If anything, I think it's very important that people demonstrate that they can compliment the manager so that 28 to 34-year-old doesn't feel threatened that they're going to have a loose cannon to contend with, which I think is one of the big fears, that they won't be able to take direction. Is that what you find with the people that you coach?
Well, Jeff, first off, you bring up a wonderful point, because I think a lot of times younger hiring managers are probably feeling threatened. They, especially, again, if people stress their skills, et cetera. So I think that as an older applicant, you want to, follow up all of this. I've got the skills to do the job, but I want to say, for one thing, I enjoy working with people of all ages. This is being proactive on that. I thrive in environments where people are of different ages, or, there's diverse environments, and I learn from people of all ages. And my job, I believe, is to support my managers in any way that will help them the best. So you want to ask open-ended questions of how, especially with a younger manager, what do you believe to be the most critical components of the job? How can I support your efforts? Those kinds of things. So you underscore that fact that, yes, you are there to make them look good.
Agreed. And I also want to chime in with being careful about language. A quick episode from when I did recruiting for this one banking client some years ago. I had someone interview for a senior vice president's position, and in the course of answering questions, he talked about the guys and gals that reported to him, and the ears perked up of the person interviewing him at the term gals as being sexist. Now, in this day and age, we have a major shift going on in our country, and to make the assumption that the person sitting opposite you is married to an individual of another sex, it could be a mistake. So I just want to remind everyone about using language like wives and husbands, no matter who's sitting in front of you, because that guy could be married to another guy. That woman could be married to another woman these days. And it's something I think culturally we need to be conscious of, because I've already heard of situations where people lose opportunities because they turned off the interviewer by using the wrong term. But I digress a little bit about language there. Let me come back to talking about some of the good tips that you have for that over 50 job hunter. What sort of tools should they use? How do they wind up getting in front of key people in order to get more interviews and eventually hired?
Well, as with any job seeker, networking is the most likely way you're going to find a position. Personal referral, studies show, and it really hasn't varied that much over the years, that about 3/4 or 75% of jobs are gotten through personal referrals. However, that number increases quite a bit, or that percentage increases the older you are, because a lot of times, unless you try to hide your age, you're not going to be able to compete on your resume alone as effectively. So you want to make sure that you're conducting a proactive job search. I know I've used that term a lot, but it's really important, especially for mature job seekers. And I would target, say, start out maybe with just a few, 5 to 10 or something, companies where you would like to work. Turn to your immediate network and see if you can identify, I wouldn't list all 5 to 10 in an email or something, but, list 3 or 4 to various people and say, I'm targeting these companies in particular. Would you know someone who might work there? And then what you want to do is, and may I use your name? You get that contact information and say, so-and-so, Joe Schmo suggested I contact you, that mutual person, and see if you could arrange for a networking meeting or an informational interview, they're often called. But a brief face-to-face meeting where you will, again, have questions pre-prepared, you'll look the part of a viable candidate, you'll show your enthusiasm, you'll ask questions that show that you are a knowledgeable insider. That's what you want to project. And that way you start to grow your network within these targeted companies. So that, again, conducting a proactive job search, I think, is the very best way, especially for older applicants.
You used that phrase, knowledgeable insider. Now, in the course of doing this informational interview, would someone talk about, and I am looking for a job, anything around here I could do? Or do they just keep with the script about learning about the field more, asking insightful questions, asking if they might know someone who works for so-and-so? You tell me. What do you think is best?
Well, I think if you are doing an informational interview and you've set it up that way, you definitely do not want to go beyond those bounds of just asking for information. Otherwise, they're going to feel tricked. And you can even approach it doing some research on some companies. I was wondering if you might have, and I would put a time limit in your email, and actually if you phone them later on too, I won't take, if you have 15, 20 minutes, I promise I won't take more time than that because people are all busy. If you might be able to meet with them. And there's a whole little way that you can go about this that we just don't quite have time for at this point. But then I would, as I said, knowledgeable insider, you want to ask questions that show they are not wasting their time with you. You've done your homework, you're aware of what this organization does. These are some, educated types of questions so that, again, they're going to feel good about having met with you. What you also might do if you've built that rapport is when you thank them, and a thank you email I think is fine. If, again, that rapport feels like it would be appropriate, you can also say, I'm attaching my resume if you wouldn't mind looking it over and giving me some suggestions or whatever, or seeing how that might fit with some of the needs that are going on right now. Those are some things you can do, but you definitely want to make sure that you are asking for information only. Now, if they come up to you during the interview or during the informational interview and say, well, gee, we've got several positions open that I think you'd be great for, of course, you're going to respond.
Really?
Yeah, really? But you don't want to in any way go beyond what the scope of what you've asked for because, again, you do not want them to feel like they've been misled.
I agree. One little detail, folks, that I know I do in the course of my work, when I try to get a few minutes of someone's time, I never use the predictable 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'll use a phrase like, can I get 7 minutes of your time? And in the course of the conversation, I'll say, I asked for 7 minutes. I have 2 minutes left. So it demonstrates I'm being respectful of their time. And when I'm done, I'll say something along the lines of, thank you for making time. I see I did this with 30 seconds to spare. I appreciate you making time today. And we'll move on from there. So they're aware that I have not overstepped my request. I'll normally get a little friendly chuckle and acknowledgement that they were concerned about the time as well. And I'll finish promptly at the amount of time I requested. We don't have a lot of time left with one another today. I want to make sure that there are a couple of other questions I had that we cover. So invariably, there are the nuanced age questions. No one will say, how old are you anyway?
I've heard some people have been asked that question, but yeah, that's rare.
Only the companies that are open to the law.
Exactly.
But what are some of the nuanced questions that you've heard that people are asked that really are a question related to age?
Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And that's a fairly typical interview question, or overqualified for this position. I think both of those are probably the two most age-related questions that are most frequently asked. And my suggestion is always think politician. They answer the question, but they don't answer, say, specifically. So both of those, especially the where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years, that would be one of those. I'm sure I like what I do. I think I'm good at it, but one can always grow one's skill set. I'm sure you'll afford me many opportunities in a position such as this to increase my skill level. That's a grow with the position, grow with the company kind of thing. So just think politician when you answer some of those.
I know the wrong answer is to say retired on a golf course.
Yes.
That one's not a good answer to that question. But, I think one of the things, and I saw this article, and I'll see if I can locate it again. There was a Harvard Business Review study I just saw in the last week that talked about the advantages of older workers and how firms are really missing the boat. That statistically they change jobs less often than the younger worker as long as they're given some modest degree of autonomy in the job and they aren't micromanaged. As long as they feel appreciated, they'll deliver the goods far better than the younger worker. And there are ways that message can be delivered in the answer. And like I said, I'll see if I can locate the article again and put it in the show notes for everyone so that in this way you're able to communicate your desire to stay with an organization, support them being successful, helping the firm be successful, and it's not like you're looking to take over anyone's job. You've had that job before. You don't need the headaches or the stress from it, and would like to help someone else be successful. I think it's a nice way to end things with that kind of remark. So, how can someone who's on an interview leave a great final impression? What sort of things might they say or do at the end of the conversation that's going to make them memorable?
Well, I think, of course, you want that interview to go as well as possible throughout, and you want to make sure that you are responding to the questions and substantiating your claims about yourself with examples and quantifying those examples of results whenever possible. So that's the key part. But the other thing is employers want employees who can handle the job. They have to have the skills to do the job, but equally as important, and maybe in some cases more important, they want someone who's pleasant to be around, someone who wants that job, who will represent the organization well, who looks professionally, who acts professionally. So you want to communicate that enthusiasm, and many people, when we're in a nervous situation, sometimes we'll tend to get a little quiet and, maybe pull that back in. I tend to get even bubblier, unfortunately. But I think a great way to end that is the interviewer will say, well, thank you so much for your time. We'll be talking to another few people, whatever. But you want to say something like, now that we've had this conversation, I am even more interested in the position. Can you tell me where you are in the hiring process, or can you tell me what the next steps might be? Or if you're feeling especially assertive, and again, that rapport warrants it, you might even say something like, I'm even more interested in this position. If I do have another question or two, might I contact you later on? But any of those where you want to really let that interviewer know, not only do you feel you can handle that job, but you would really like to work for that organization, I think is a good way to end that interview.
I agree, and I'm going to add one more in there and use the example from a legal case. Invariably, there's a summary that one lawyer or the other is going to provide to a jury. We've all seen this movie or TV show where the lawyer stands up in front of the jury box, the judge is listening intently, and they do this summation. Well, to some degree, I also think it's useful to do a very, very brief summation that says something along the lines of, I really appreciate you making time today to see me. What I heard you talk about was that you were looking for someone with, and you talk about a couple of the skills and attributes that were mentioned in the course of the conversation. in the course of answering questions, I just want to make sure that my experience with such and such came across to you, because I really have this kind of experience, and it could be very effective in supporting your objectives here. And then you go through that conclusion. If any questions come to mind, would you mind if I gave you a call? And of course they'll say, oh, no, fine. Or you say, if you're not feeling aggressive, you might talk about send them an email with a question. However it is, that's a third way that someone can end it, depending upon how assertive they are. Mary Eileen, thank you so much for making time today. Want to ask you about your book. I've read a lot of different job search books. What makes yours different? What makes it more effective for this audience than some of the standard ones out there?
Well, first off, I would like to thank you for inviting me, Jeff. It's been a real pleasure for me. And I would like to, I'll give a little plug here, Land the Job You Love, and the subtitle is 10 Surefire Strategies for Job Seekers Over 50. And my book is a little different because I spent years as an outplacement consultant. And so I walk people who had been right size, down size, whatever, through the parts of finding a new position. I'm very sure, very similar to things that you have done over your career. But I've borrowed from the outplacement manuals to create a book workbook so that I will give you best practices, and then there's fill-in-the-blank exercises so that the readers can really hone down these ideas and create their own outcomes for them. So the 10 Surefire practices are various aspects of the actual job search process, and prior to that I have exercises on identifying your values, the practical things, what's important to you at this time in your life, because as we age, these change, the practical realities you're looking for, asking yourself some of the bigger questions. So that's more kind of like, let's land a job you love, because I think at our age we deserve that. We have income needs, but we also, again, want to contribute and give back. So it's kind of a combination of the two, and it's basically an outplacement manual format that focuses on job search for mature job seekers. So the tips are all focused at the older job seeker.
Mary Eileen, thank you. And folks, we'll be back next time with more advice to help you find work quickly.